I'm curious about how you take care of yourself mentally and physically in the world of running.
I really had this tendency of pushing hard, proving my value by the output and by the things I could achieve. Running was more of this angle of control. So it wasn't joyful back then at all. It was more like discipline. Inside, it just didn't feel good.
What's your sort of relationship with the idea of, if I do enough, I will then feel something?
I was seeing myself as in like not being good enough, not achieving enough, not doing things fast enough. All these things were just like, accumulating it. So let's just go running, because then I can stop the time, I can check the calories, I can, look at my body and see the results.
Welcome to the Mindfulness in Motion podcast, the show that helps you move beyond the checklist of life and into a world of joy and meaning and discovery. I'm your host, Cori Myka, and I'm excited to have today in this episode, Annie, who is a peaceful productivity mentor and the founder of Virtufully. Now, I should have asked you that before because that's a little bit of a mouthful, but I'll let you say it in a second here. She's all about rediscovering joy through mindful running and building a more sustainable relationship with movement and productivity. Whether you're feeling burned out or trying to get back into movement or simply looking for a more compassionate way to approach your goals, this conversation's for you. I usually say let's dive in because that's my ball of wax, but let's walk gently in maybe if we're talking.
Sounds good.
Well, welcome. Thank you so much for being here today. And let's just start with my little verbal fumble there.
Don't worry, it is a bit of a mouthful, exactly.
Yeah, how do you say
And you
that?
did check in about my name, and it didn't even cross my mind. Maybe I should tell you that it's Virtufully, but don't worry about it.
Great. Well, how did you get that name? Tell me a little bit more.
Well, I started as a virtual assistant, and back then it was virtual assistant as in full service or full assistance sort of thing. And that became Virtufully. So yeah, it's just now I sort of feel the meaning is more the virtue as in, my virtue. And somehow I added fully. So I don't know. But yes, it is a bit of a mouthful.
Yeah, well, I love that new version of it for yourself of virtue, like of your own personal having virtue. That is wonderful. And I think that kind of lends itself to talking about your running, your experience with running and coming back to running and how you treat yourself valuably and compassionately in running. Because I know that can be something so often I see people who come for learning to swim as an adult and they're like, because I've been a runner and I'm just like, my body cannot sustain it. So I'm curious about how you take care of yourself mentally and physically in the world of running.
Oh God, yeah, where to start? I mean, running, I grew up in East Germany. I was an athlete as a child and really had that dream of being a professional Olympian athlete. It was very competitive. And in my childhood, especially early childhood, it was a really big thing. Then my parents moved and there was no athletic club. And so I totally stopped sort of that part. But even up today, and as I'm talking to you, every time I get goosebumps. It was such a big thing for me. It was really hard to actually stop. Anyway, fast forward to like adult life. And eventually I moved from Germany to London and I worked there after university and I was running almost every day. But then running was more of, how to say that, like sort of this angle of control in this young adult's life in this fast-paced, city where I was new, where I was the foreigner and all of that, and was like sort of holding on to control. And it was also a bit of I think, body image issue in terms of the harder I can push my body, the more I know I can do things. So, like there is definitely a connection with the running as part of my way of proving, and then going into productivity, which is what I do nowadays, because along all these like many, many years from early childhood until now, mid-40s, I really had this tendency of pushing hard, proving my value by the output and by the things I could achieve. So running was a big thing. I loved it. I was doing it almost daily. I kept pushing, harder and harder in that sense. So it wasn't joyful back then at all. It was more like discipline. Then I had children and I completely stopped running because I had no time for it. And then going forward, again, productivity, trying to implement the peaceful side, which for me is more the mindfulness and the emotional well-being and this balance, this elusive balance. How can we work in a better way? And eventually got to the point where my body just kept aching, sitting too many hours, not feeling good. And I started running again. And just the Sunday, I ran my second half marathon. So I went from 10 years of nothing, no running, no exercise. I mean, I'm generally a fit person, and I guess there's a muscle memory, doing nothing, to now again being very much in the running, but not in the competitive side of things. Well, I'll be honest, when doing the running, the race, the half marathon, there was some competitiveness that came through, but in a nice way, in this like, oh my God, I can do this. Yes, I'm doing it. And yes, I can, stick to the goal I had set for myself, and not this like beat yourself up sort of thing. So yeah, I think this is the hopefully quick enough summary of where I am today. And then let's see where you want to take it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the first thing that piqued my curiosity is the early time, the before kids time, talking about that you using running and probably other areas of your life, these like checklist of things to prove your virtue in the world, to feel virtuous, that you have, this is what gives you value, is if you can check off enough boxes in the world. Did you have a sense of feeling valued? Did that work for you? What was and you might not have thought about it that much at the time. I would.
Yeah. No, not at the time. Yeah.
Yeah. But when you look back at that, what's your sort of relationship with the idea of, if I do enough, I will then feel something?
Yeah. No, definitely there was this. I mean, this is all like in hindsight and working through a lot of the things that were coming up later in life that got me into these corners where I felt really not happy about this beautiful life that on the outside I had created in this, amazing island that I live, and these beautiful children I had, and the good job I had, and all of that. Inside, it just didn't feel good. And it really, a lot of it led back to the way I was seeing myself, as in like not being good enough, not achieving enough, not doing things fast enough, career ladder, having children. I sort of had children late, in the sense like where I grew up, I had them in my early 30s, when a lot of my friends had them in their 20s. And all these things were just like, yeah, accumulating. And I think the running really just was this thing that I could easily do, like it didn't require a lot of, I don't know, setup or something, but it was just, I had time back then, and it was just the logical thing. And I think there was a lot of also anxiety around being just by myself, like if I'm just on my own, does it mean I'm not loved? I don't have enough friends. I'm not, like I didn't have that big job title that required me to stay many, many hours in the office. So I had time in that sense. And that was all coming back to like, I'm not doing enough here. So let's just go running, because then I can stop the time. I can check the calories. I can, like look at my body and see the results. I can, all of these things. And yeah, I think that was definitely a big part of back then, how I would feel about it. But in hindsight, it didn't give me.
Yeah, I'm curious if you could talk to her now. Like if she still has the time, she's still, in this place in her career, and, that pre-children, right, that you're watching the clock go by as that fictitious, I mean, it is fictitious and not fictitious for women, right? Because women do have a certain time that we have in terms of having children. But, I'm sort of curious, like, what's your now compassionate way to talk to her? Yeah, maybe she still wants to run, but how maybe she would do it differently, or what would you ask her to maybe add into that equation for herself?
I like that. I think now it's the compassion that comes through for me, in terms of, you've got an amazing body who can do amazing things. It gave birth to two beautiful children. It can run, at a good speed and at a good distance. So it's really capable. It's strong, and to be proud of it, rather than seeing it something that still needs to be fixed in that sense, like run faster, run longer, and all of that, build more muscle. That's sort of like what I would would have said back then. Now it's more like actually just appreciate it and also listen to it a little bit more. On the days when you don't feel like it, don't push yourself to the limit. Allow yourself to just also, a walk is good enough, or a shorter run. At the same time, I'm always like mindful of, okay, sometimes your brain wants to tell you things like, wants to find an easy way out. But to like really just understand, are you generally physically tired, and does your body need the rest? And is that just what it's requiring now? And then lean into that. And nowadays also, I think for me, it's a lot about the clarity. Back then, I would put the music louder if my brain starts thinking. I would change the route because it was like, the same thing, like same old like routine of like, oh, okay, like these things would make me uncomfortable. Now it's more like, oh, hold on, put the music down. The brain is going somewhere. Allow the thought process and that sort of thing. And yeah, even when the route is the same, try to see something different. See how the light is different. See how, I run a lot at the beach. See how high the tide or how low the tide is. Watch those tourists, lying on the beach early morning, like that sort of thing. Back then it would have been really like, oh my God, this is getting boring. Okay, next thing, where can I find the next better route? Where's the next running club? Always onto something else. And now it's more like, okay, it's fine. You're good where you are. And I think this is what was missing then. I was always looking for something.
So good, so good. So it's this transformation between literally and figuratively chasing something versus opening up some compassion and curiosity into what is here now. And what is here now could be, I really want to run really fast today, or I need a slower pace and I need to walk, or I need to completely rest and take a day off today from the running. Coming from a place of fullness and compassion, I think that's how we sort of beat the concern about, oh, now I'm just going to become lazy and never do it. No, yeah, when you really compassionately look at what does my body really need right now, and some days it probably really does need to run and run hard and run fast, and some days it needs to rest. Yeah, I love that. I also really love that you're giving her the information of to allow herself to be in the smaller details of her life, to slow down, to see that, so that you're not having to chase new experiences, but to deepen the experiences that are there,
you said that
are available. Yeah. That's where that rich life, I think, really comes from, to be in there. Nice. So we've given some advice to your past self. Some compassionate. So tell us a little bit about your practice today. I'm imagining it has some of these elements in it, that you changed your relationship with running today.
Yeah, definitely. It's still relatively structured just because that really works for me in the sense of my business and my life, and the fact that I still have young children who require a lot of my time. So it is quite structured in the day. I have set days where I go for a run. But the run itself can vary. It can really be depending on how I feel. Because I wanted to run this half marathon and I'm planning to run a marathon next year, I've definitely put in some longer runs, which initially felt really scary in the sense of like after 10 years of not doing anything else, was not in great shape. And I was like starting to run, and this like thought was coming in like, oh my God, look at you, how slow you are now. Or so you're getting so, you're out of breath after 2 kilometers. Like, why are you even trying to do this? That was initially, like I had started, I think, sort of 3 times with a new practice, because 2 times I talked myself out of it. I don't have the time. Or secondly, it's just like, what are you trying to do here? Mid-40, now you're trying to run. What's that? Sort of like negative talk. But then eventually, consistently, I got into it and I just fell back in love with it. But yeah, so it's usually 2 days set, and sometimes if I manage 3 days. And one day I recently started that, which is speed interval, which is not something that I would have done normally. Like I just listened on a podcast. I can't remember who shared that, but I found it interesting in terms of, running practice depending on age. because like I said, I'm mid-40 now, so I'm very much like understanding what's going on in the body in terms of hormones and everything. And I learned, and I don't know if that's like fully true or not, but that, like the long distance runs can be challenging, more challenging at that age. But if you push your body in terms of like the interval, the speed, it's apparently very good. And I'm like, okay, let me try, because I like to try things. And I really enjoyed that. That was quite interesting because it's shorter and it's more pushing. And I think my old, like athletics push your body sort of thing comes through. But because it's short, it's more contained. I feel like it's not going wherever it wants. It's very clearly defined. It's got a beginning and an end, and this is what it looks like. And push yourself in that window, and then you run back home, easy peasy, and that sort of thing. So yeah, that's currently the practice. At least one longer one speed, and then one sort of 5 to 6K relaxed.
Nice. What I'm hearing here that is, I think, very universally useful for people if they want to run or not, is this idea that you said you have a container in which you have it in. You've created a structure for yourself and that allows then some freedom. So there's a place for some accountability structure, right? And a place on your calendar. I mean, we do things that we want to do. We have to actually put them on our calendar with priority. But then now you're experimenting within it. So you're experimenting with this interval training and it's fun and interesting to you, right? You get to vary up what you are doing in that practice. But yeah, that is such a great piece to both meet that part of our brain that is afraid we're never going to do something and that we need to push ourselves or whatever, to be able to have a certain container of safety. That's one of the frameworks that we'll talk about in swimming, is to create a container of safety. In that arena, it's about that you can get air easily anytime you want, and you can come back to calm if something unexpected happens. If we have this kind of container, then people can experiment in the water and they can figure out how their body and the water work together. So I love hearing, you have a container, a time container, and some experiments that you have within that time. And I would imagine part of that, as you gave that advice to your younger self, you might keep the container of today is my day to go run, but perhaps if your body really needs walking or it needs something else during that time, that you would allow that to be part of your curiosity and your time.
Absolutely. Exactly. Yeah. It's more really, like something should happen in that time window that is physical activity, but it doesn't have to look a certain way, or it doesn't have to be, like, it's not like, oh, now I'm going to check all the time, like how fast am I running and how far do I get? It's more like, okay, does that feel good? And sometimes I stop in between, and other days I keep running longer when it feels really good. So it really depends.
Yeah. Now, the other thing you said that I was curious about early on in that advice to your younger self, you said you used to turn up the music, and now you say, well, perhaps it's okay to let your thinking go, that you're discovering something. I can't remember exactly how you put it. So say more about that. I'm curious about that, because I think, when I'm coaching people, one of the things that we work on actually is to help quiet the mind, that we're using these practices to quiet the mind. So tell me more about your experience and what that's like, of allowing your mind.
Yeah. I mean, allowing my mind is more like sort of like the thinking of different, like usually it's something around the business, something that, comes up, an idea or a project or something that is the back of my mind, and it hadn't had the space yet to really get deep thinking for. And very often on a run, it will just come up and it will be like, oh, what about this idea? Or, oh, Anne, you said you would be doing X, Y, and Z this month. You still haven't done that. But because now I have more of this like compassionate practice when I think about those things, it's more like, oh, yeah, you did say that. Why hasn't it happened, and what's going on here? And I would just allow myself to that time to think, because in the rest of my day, because it's quite full in the sense of like business, children, and all sorts of other, family commitments, I'm actually seeing that container as this like free thinking if it wants to happen, if the thoughts want to come. Other days it's just like, oh, listen to that song or listen to that podcast. But it's really when the thoughts come up, I'll be like, yeah, okay, I'm fine. We can have a little, mental chat with each other because I don't get a lot of that time. And back in the days, it was more the negative self-talk, they're like, oh, you still have this and that, and you didn't do. But now it's more constructive, I would say, and often also quite creative. I do feel that running really helps me with the thought process in terms of digesting things or, like changing maybe the angle I look at stuff. So yeah, that's more the way of thinking, not so much the, shouting at yourself and beating yourself
Yes,
up.
yes. And I think that's key. I think, one of the things I'll teach people when I'm coaching with them is this idea that we use, like you were saying, small details to really be in these little mini meditations of like noticing the tide, noticing the light change. We end up in a different part of our brain. And that is where that creative thinking can then come out. We're not in that analytical part of our brain.
Yeah.
And so, if you're using something like running to allow yourself to feel gently into your body, or that compassionate, it's okay if it's, I don't know, a little creaky to start with, and let yourself be experimental. And it does lend itself to this open, productive kind of thinking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And I know I use when I started really mindfulness in motion. If you haven't heard, there's some political things happening in the United States that a lot of people are brings up a lot of discomfort. If anybody hasn't noticed that. But how many times I'm out on a walk and my brain is just like going on and on about it, but it's not useful thinking.
Yeah, no.
It's just, I'm just allowed, and I can tell it's not useful thinking because it feels so bad in my body. And
Yeah.
And so then using this, tapping into the other side of our brain of our senses, bringing in our senses, and to quiet that part of our brain by super tuning into our senses and identifying the difference between that kind of thinking and, like you had said, beating myself up kind of thinking, criticism kind of thinking. Of course, we would want to escape from that.
Yeah.
Yeah. But using these very mindful practices, I love this, to be able to get to that other side of your brain. And then you have space for a positive kind of thinking that is helpful.
Exactly. And more like mindfully choosing, okay, I notice this is going on. There is something, like the other day I had a bit of like, a situation, and I had this moment of running, and I was like replaying that moment and what I said and what the other person said. And I felt like, okay, like, yeah, this is, I've been running for a while now and I'm still thinking that way. Like, I think it's enough sort of like, allow maybe a little bit of space if you need to sort of vent in your head and sort of like let it out, but not to linger on it. Like, that's usually where we get stuck in that negativity, in this spiral of like, oh, all of this is so terrible. And then obviously choosing that maybe I don't want to stay there. Maybe I want to focus on other things and find a better way of either dealing with that situation or, looking at something else entirely. I think that's, for me, that took a bit of practice, because my mind would usually be like, oh, like keep digging into that and keep replaying. And that's when, back in the days, I would put the music up because my mind wouldn't stop going down that negativity route. But now it's more like, okay, I hear you. Yeah, I know this is going on, but actually I want to enjoy this run. I want to have a good time. And so I'm going to try and find something. And yeah, naturally I was leaning towards the details of the sea and the environment. I didn't even realize that would help. But when you said it, was like, yeah, I guess that's a smart thing to do.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, and that's really kind of the key thing of why I'm doing this podcast, right? Is for us to be able to see this mindfulness in motion, to be able to see, and it's not allowing our brain, that you have a choice in the direction that your brain goes, that our brains are presenting all kinds of thoughts all the time, working through things all the time, offers all of these thoughts all of the time with the idea that it's being productive. And I love you saying, it's about knowing I have a choice. Maybe it is useful to hash over that conversation or that problem, but at some point it tips out of usefulness and make a choice. Is that how I want to spend my time, my brain time, or do I want to enjoy this run? And asking ourselves that question, so powerful to just even interject with that question.
Exactly.
Yeah, Absolutely. Nice. All right. Well, anything else that you would like us to know about you or your running practice, or inspire other people to bring that mindfulness into whatever, maybe it's renewing a past passion that or it's in some other area, but anything else you'd like us to know?
I just think for me, it really was a big part of what was missing, because I've always been somebody who would move a lot, and it just makes me feel so good. And every time after a run, I just come to home and to my home office in this different energized way, which is just beautiful. Like the energy that moves through your body is just a different one. And with that, my focus and my clarity is so different. And so it's really become the productivity tool for me is to move your body, and that could be running or yoga or whatever. And in my case as well, like I had to try a few different things, and I had to like sort of get into it. But once you figure out what works, I think this is like where the practice really becomes a beautiful part of the day. And I just want to share with the listener that, even if you have sort of a specific image of how you would be the person who does something, it's just, like you can grow into that. Like I said, I had to start like 3 times before I felt in a place where I could make this a practice. And now I'm just so happy I even started and not let myself talk me out of even the idea, which is so easy because, again, the brain wants to tell you these things, and it just, so I think this is the main message. It's a productivity tool from me as a productivity mentor. It makes me more focused and efficient, and it also comes from this place of compassion that it can look anything to anybody, and it just it can evolve, it can develop and grow.
As you were talking about that with the productivity tool, it made me think there's a study, and I can't quote exactly the study, but I knew about this when my kids were in school, where they did research on kids of where they put their physical education or where they put recess relative to like a math class. And they found that kids who had physical activity, something that got their heart rate going, because it kind of doesn't matter what it is, but they actually got their heart rates going, those kids did better on their academic classes by having that come before the class, versus kids who were given more study time or tutor time or stuff like that. The actual getting that blood flowing to the brain, getting that body engaged in that way improved their academic skills or performance. Which is just
amazing.
And that focus piece. That is why my kids had to ride their bike to school.
Exactly. Yes.
No, I don't need to drive you there. You need to get your brain ready for school, for sitting in that chair.
Exactly.
And that works all the way through to adults, especially since we have such long sedentary hours, that just the nature of most people, or a lot of people's work, right, is behind computers.
Absolutely.
And having that. It's always on my list, my noon-ish, my middle of the day, I have to get out and go outside and at least walk around the block if I have any hope of having any productivity in the afternoon.
Exactly. If you just keep sitting and trying to push through, that doesn't work. And that used to be me. And I would be like, why? Why does it feel so bad? Why does it feel so heavy? And it just, there is a lot of studies about that too, that, you need to take breaks, and your brain has only so many hours of capacity. And if you don't take breaks, it just goes down in terms of output and quality and all of that. So,
absolutely. Just the sun, air, movement. Open up that brain. Take care of our brains. They do so much for us.
Exactly. And then they try to sell us the next productivity app and another tool and all of that. But actually, we have it there, right there on our head, on our shoulders. It's there. We just need to take good care of it. That's usually what I say to a lot of people. Like, systems are nice. I love a good system and I love a good efficient tool. But at the end, it all comes down to, what's between our 2 ears. That's what my mom used to say as well to me. So,
Yes, absolutely. Very good. Well, before we we sign off, let folks know where they can find you if they would like some more help with productivity and tips and having you as a mentor.
Yeah, so the best place is the podcast. It's called The Productivity Sweet Spot. It's available everywhere you listen to podcasts, so find me there. And then the website is AnneRajoo.com. So that's ANNERAJOO.com. And there's some different tools and resources available for you. And you can find me there.
Great. Perfect. And of course, that'll be on our show notes. Thank you, Annie, so much for being here. We appreciate hearing your story and inspiration to get ourselves moving. If running is the thing for people, or be curious about what felt good in your body as a kid and where could you get it started again, even if it takes a couple of tries.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.